hard time hearing. So for those who are engaging with us remotely, if you could do us that favor. And also for those engaging remotely, a word about the chat function. It isn't intended to ask questions. It is intended to use to sign up for the public forum part of the agenda of the meeting. And Jill, who is our host, is unable to really answer specific questions throughout the meeting. So wanted to mention that as well. So moving into the agenda, 2.0 public forum sign up. So if anybody in person or remotely would like to sign up to address the board tonight, you can do so. The in-person is over by the entrance, and the remote participants, they can let Jill know that they would like to address the board for the public forum. And if there's any specific visitors that want to be recorded for tonight, you can sign up over there as well. And I don't have any announcements. Does anybody have announcements? I do want to introduce our new superintendent. I think that's an announcement. Rachel Stuckey is joining us for the first time in her official role as our superintendent, so yay. And as you all know, we've had quite the process this spring to make that selection. And Rachel, just for your awareness as well, I'm sure Rachel doesn't mind me saying, she's struggling with laryngitis tonight. So if she's having a hard time projecting loudly enough, Erica will be her voice. so we have a backup plan if Rachel's voice, if we lose that. So that's really my official announcement. Does anybody have any other announcements? And we're getting to the oath of office, so we'll introduce the newer members at the table at that. Okay, so let's do that. Moving on to agenda item 3. 6, actually this should be, it says 6.1, but it should just be renumbered 3.1. So new board members oath of office. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with you both at the same time. We have Andrea Fow and Mark Brendan, who were elected to be new members of our school board. So if you could stand and come on over here. Do you have this? If you want to hold it, you can. So repeat after me. I, and then state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I, Andrew Fow, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Oregon and the laws thereof, and the policies of the Manual School District.
the Constitution of the State of Oregon and the laws thereof, and the policies of the Manual School District.
During my term, I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of the office of school board member to the best of my ability.
During my term, I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of this office of school board member to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. You can't get out of it. And welcome. Welcome, Andrea and Mark.
Really unprofessional, but can I get start over your log?
Yes.
We have new members and a new superintendent, and I would appreciate that. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Erica. The next item on the agenda is to elect our board chair and vice chair for the year, and we're all eligible. Oregon rules about school boards say that nobody can serve as board chair longer than 4 consecutive terms. I have served 2 terms so far. Teresa's been vice chair 1 term. So we're all on the table for being able to hold the office of chair or vice chair. A little bit about that. So the board chair's role, it's a lot extra. And you run the meetings, you facilitate the meetings, and you also are working off and on with the superintendent between meetings to form the agenda, to answer specific questions that might come up that make sense to have the board chair weigh in on. And so it is an extra. It's not huge, and it is extra. So does
We
anybody
also respond to input from community.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Good point, John. So with this new board, we may decide to do things differently, but how we have been handling communications from community members, when we do get emails or correspondence from community members that are directed to the board as a whole, and not including the superintendent, the board chair takes the lead on responding to those messages. So that's actually taken quite a bit of extra time as board chair this last year, which is great. And then if the superintendent is included in the correspondence, the expectation is that the superintendent replies and includes everybody. And when the board chair does respond to those questions or comments or inquiries, the superintendent is copied on those replies just for transparency to make sure we're all on the same page. And the superintendent can correct any not clear facts that the board chair may have included in the response. So yes, good point, John. So that is definitely, and again, as a board, we're going to be working together to figure out how we want to work together, and that could change. But for now, that's the agreement we have. Anything else about the roles of, and vice chair is here as a backup, and vice chair. So if the board chair is unable to be in a meeting, the vice chair facilitates that meeting, and the vice chair
I did do it once this year.
It's also a sounding board for the board chair if the board chair needs to work through something, and just, yeah, Teresa served in that capacity a lot this last year as well. So it's been good. And I would say if you agree to be board chair, we all are committing to come to all the meetings. And when you're board chair, it's even, I think, more important to be present at all the meetings if at all possible. So, any other comments or questions about the roles?
I recommend Sherry Reedman.
I second that nomination.
So we have a motion to nominate Sherry Reedman to be board chair and a second. And any other nominations? Any discussion about that? Okay. And I would willingly be board chair again, so that would be fine. So let's go ahead, and since we're all in person, I don't need to do the poll, and we're not masked, so it's easier. So all in favor of Sherry Reedman as board chair? Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. So I will stay in the chair with the gavel. So thank you for entrusting me with that role. I really appreciate that. Okay, so what about vice chair? I think Teresa's done a great job, and in our workings as a board, knowing that the same person can't be board chair year after year, it might make sense to continue to have Teresa as vice chair, and or not. So anybody have anything? Anybody want to make a nomination?
I nominate Teresa for the vice chair.
Right, so Mark makes a motion to nominate Teresa. Do I hear a second? I'll second. Andrew seconds. Any other nominations? Any discussion? And you're good with it?
Sure.
Okay, that's the biggest discussion.
I learned a lot from you then, so it was nice doing that.
So all in favor of Teresa Kincaid being our vice chair? Aye. And no opposition. Wonderful. Right, so next item on the agenda is the school board calendar for 2021-22. And this is basically our kind of outline month by month of the big issues that we're going to have on the agenda every month. And so this stays pretty consistent year after year. And does anybody have questions or comments on the proposed calendar and what we'll be talking about? It is page, I would say page 5 in our packet, or 4,
yeah.
page
4
4.
and 5.
Yeah. 4 and 5. So if you want to take
It's
a minute.
easier when we have it on our computer, so next time it'll be quicker.
We do have listed on here review revised strategic plan. Normally that may happen in July. And we will, that on the agenda? No,
It
it's not.
is, well, no, it's on the calendar.
It's on the calendar. And the board, we had this discussion, I think at our June meeting, where we agreed that we're gonna defer that discussion because we want our new superintendent and new board members to get a little more aware of what's in our strategic plan before we really tackle those updates. So, but I do encourage us to always be aware of what's in our strategic plan, because that really is the roadmap and the compass for our administrators and staff of the board and the district's priorities as we move ahead and adopt budgets and policies. So that's the only thing I see that we will probably kind of push out this year. Does anybody have any other? And this is where, let's just, if we could verbalize our agreement that this calendar looks good for the coming year. Yeah. And is anybody opposed to that? Jill, or Rachel, do we need a formal vote on that? I don't think so either. So this will just drive the agenda for us as we move forward through the year. All right. And then the organizational board calendar, organizational and procedural resolution, which starts on page 6. This is where it's really important in our district that we know who has authority to do what, when, who can sign checks, who can make certain decisions, who can sign contracts. So it's the logistical, operational, really important information so things can keep running in our district. So this is basically who we have as designated to assume those responsibilities operationally, I would say, for our district. So does anybody have questions or comments on that? It's pretty straightforward. And we have some new names this year with Rachel as our superintendent and Christy Brackenreed as our business manager. So yeah, pretty straightforward. So no objection to the resolution. Perfect. And with this, since it says resolution, I think we should have a motion to adopt this resolution. So if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt the organization and procedural resolution dated July 12th, 2021.
I move that we adopt the organization and procedural resolution from July 12th, 2021.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, passes unanimously. School board operating protocol. This is on page 7-ish. Keep going in your packet. We, as a board, operate together amongst ourselves, and we operate with the superintendent directly. And there are some times when we're operating and engaging with people other than the superintendent and ourselves. But this really, what we did, you notice this was updated in January 11 of this year. And we did work on this last winter, fall-winter, because we had some hiccups in how we were working together, and we identified the need to really hone in on what makes sense as a board. So this is what we came up with, the 5 who were in office at the time. And it's pretty much in addition to what's in policy already, and sometimes clarifies what's in policy. So when you see, like in parentheses, BCD and BBF, that tells you that there's an actual policy that speaks directly to that. And we had support from OSB to do this. So when we have our work session in a couple weeks, this is on the agenda for that work session to go through that and make sure that it's still where we want it to be, and we can update it and make it our own. And at any time, we can make changes to this document. It's very helpful, though. I actually have this with me for every meeting. And it's just helpful to remind ourselves of what we've agreed to as far as working together and working with the superintendent, essentially. So any comments on that?
So we'll talk about this there.
Yeah, this is on the agenda for our work session on July 27th. Any questions from Andrea or Mark specifically, or any, or the more tenured? Okay, so that is that. So we do have, moving on to approve the agenda, we do have an agenda change. We are moving one item out of the consent item. So we're moving item 5.5, annual physical restraint and seclusion report, to item 6.3. So it will be a standalone report. So that is a change to the agenda. And I don't know of any other changes. I think we're good to go. So at this point, we talk about it, make sure that the agenda is good. And another point of order for our meetings is that if a board member wants to amend the agenda, if they want to add something to the agenda, this is the time that you would do that. So you have an opportunity as board members to request that an item be added to the agenda beforehand, and that comes to me, and then I work with the superintendent to develop the agenda. And no requests have ever been denied. So if you do want something added to the agenda, ahead of time is better. And if the night of you want to switch things around and you want something included that's not included, you can make that motion, we can discuss, and then the whole board votes on that. So just for your awareness. I haven't seen that happen yet. And that's not to say it can't happen. So, but approving the agenda. So does someone want to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Recommend that I move we approve the agenda as adjusted.
Sure, I have a question. So on Friday and Saturday, we're the first part of the school board kind of conference for the year that we attended. And one of those sessions was talking about school districts that have representation on their school board. Would this be the time to maybe want to add that discussion, or has it been discussed at our level of having student representation on our school board?
You know, it's come up in the past, and I would say you could ask to be added tonight. I think that might be appropriate for a future meeting, so we have more time to learn what other districts are doing, learn from you what you could learn, have a little more information before we move on it. And it can be that is, I'm making a note maybe for the August agenda. So if you would like it tonight, you can make that motion to add it, or I can make a note and we can definitely have it on the August agenda.
Yeah, August would be
Is that good? All right. Let's do it. Any other, well, so we have a motion. Does somebody want to make a second to approve the agenda?
I'll second.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Right, passes unanimously. Perfect. And then the consent items, these are items that we are assuming are not anything that needs further discussion, that they're pretty routine and not, again, not needing board discussion to approve the consent items. And at this time on the agenda, I do ask, does any board member see anything on the consent agenda that they want pulled for whatever reason? And if it does get pulled, it usually gets moved into discussion or action items as a separate agenda item. So does any board member want to adjust the consent items? Okay, I would field a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
Second.
Okay. You want to ask? Yeah, ask the motion.
I move that we approve the consent items as presented.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to reports. So our superintendent report, Rachel's very first.
And because of my voice, it will be very brief as well. My apologies to those of you at home that cannot hear me clearly. I will do my very best to enunciate. Pardon me. I'd like to talk about 3 updates tonight, one being summer school. And I do believe all of you have this in front of you, the talking points that I'll be talking about. It is not in the board packet. We have 3 different options for summer programming this summer, starting with traditional summer school, which started today, July 12th through August 12th. We've had 100 students that are enrolled, kindergarten through 8th grade, for core instruction, math, language arts, and science, and free breakfast and lunches provided. We also will have in August mini camps that will be focusing on arts and crafts, pickleball, rocket camp, and Lego robotics. And up to 80 students may enroll in those programs. And then for middle school math, we have Summer Bridge program, August 9th through the 26th. Up to 30 students may enroll, and free breakfast and lunch will be provided for those students. Before I move on, any questions on summer programming?
Yeah, on the math, it's identified already who the weak people are or the people that are needing more instruction. Are those a targeted audience? Is this we've got 30 spots, first come, first serve? How does that work?
That is an excellent question, sir, and I don't have an answer to it, but I would suspect that it is targeted.
It's actually it's an accelerated math.
Okay.
It's what?
It's accelerated math, so it's actually an AVID program for
Okay.
students. So we're looking at potential learning loss. So students who may have needed middle school, who may have not had the opportunity to make as much progress as they could have. So it's actually not a remedial math class at all. It's not a remedial math class, it's actually accelerated.
Oh, okay.
It's to prepare the incoming 8th graders to be able to take the 8th grade accelerated math class successfully next year.
Okay, and then maybe this is off the topic, but I was hoping that with our desire to accelerate or equalize is more the goal instead of accelerate. And not that acceleration is bad, but to bring we've got a Hispanic population that's dramatically lower than the white population, although they are the greatest population of our school. And I would have hoped that we were trying to do something to target that and move it up. And I understand that what we've done is we've taken a band of people that are doing well and pushed them. Please, I won't get the wording right, but leaving no child behind, I don't know about that, but it doesn't sound right. But making sure that everybody's getting an equal shot at this, as opposed to making sure the strong get stronger.
John, I can definitely address that. So we looked at just data. We did not look at necessarily demographic. All students had a chance to be eligible for this program. So I can appreciate, I think what you're trying to say is we're looking at, is there equitable access to this program, right?
No, even more than that. I'm trying to say we are the brainiacs for the district. We know what we're trying to get to. Our goal is to do what? And when you're already above what everybody else has, I'm saying I need to retarget or create a technique for the people that don't want to target. When I'm not good at, I was never good at sprinting, always hated it, the worst. But that doesn't mean I get to get out of sprinting, and that doesn't mean we only take the sprinters out. No, you're going to have to work Conklin. You're going to have to take him out there and teach him how to sprint.
Well, John, I would call your attention to the traditional summer school, the second bullet. We have those students enrolled
So we have
in core instruction. So we have 100 students that are enrolled in the core curriculum for math, language arts, and science. So that's,
So did you just say
everyone's
I'm way
getting
off
that.
target?
No, not at all. You're
That's
bringing
okay.
up, no, not at all. But I do want to call your attention to the fact that we do have 100 students who will be getting specific supports and instruction in math.
And they're
this
more
camp.
targeted, right?
Well,
The AVID, and then the AVID is preparing them to take that challenging math in 8th grade, which has been a challenge as
So
well.
we have, John, if I could, we have several different programs running, and a lot of it is based on funding, and we have always run an ELL and migrant summer school, always. And that is based solely from our migrant and Title III ELL funds. Because I believe I hear a lot of passion coming from your voice related to that. And so that is running, it's always running. We got additional funds this year. We applied for the summer school learning grants where we got this influx of money. We had to pay 25% of it where the district funded it, and then they kicked in the 75%. So with that, it had to have, there were different parameters around it. But we were able to fund some of these really great activities, but we also needed to have entry points for a variety of students. And yes, we did look at different tiers, and that's why it was kind of late getting out to some other students, because we did target different students first and then kind of a rollout invitation, if that makes sense. To your point of students who are maybe more deficient, perhaps like in credits, we have credit recovery going on for high school students also.
Correct.
So we have 4 actually different layers of things going on. But we also wanted to make sure that all students had access to some fun summer learning opportunities like Lego Robotics, where there's an entry for all students, to really also focus on building relationships, social, emotional. School is a fun place to be, right? Like, come back to school. We want you to be in our district.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Maybe Erica can answer this a little bit better. 100 students, is that what we do normally every year? Is that higher, lower than
That is,
class?
that's a great question. So that's higher because our funding is so much more. Usually summer school is just run with, it's co-funded with our migrant and Title III grant. And so I can't usually fund that many students. So
What percentage of students that you initially targeted did sign up for summer school?
so initial with just our, that's a hard question because one, our Title III money was half of what it was before, and we did not get migrant funding. So that's kind of a loaded question. So we weren't able to invite as many. I think in our first wave, Jill, we had 40 kids.
And not just EL.
Just ELs, 40, I think, on our first wave. When we did summer school 5 years ago, we had, 70 kids, but our funding is so much lower. Our response was not very high. In fact, childcare, we only have 3 kids attending, which I expected to be much different. So we have also applied for the childcare grant, secured it, opened up 40 slots for childcare, but only 3 are attending.
Okay, and then the mini camps, that was through grant money as well. Is that part of the 25% we fund, 75%
Yes.
is funded through the grant? Is that something that you can reapply for every year? That and the summer bridge program?
No, this is one time due to federal funding from COVID to try to re-engage learners and assist with learning loss and just building relationships. So we're trying to capitalize on everything that was out there.
Thank you.
Sorry, that
I know, I appreciate that. You saved.
It's been a lot of work over the last few months.
All right, moving on. Ready Schools Safe Learners, or sometimes known as Russell, has a new iteration called the Resiliency Framework that came out in June. There will be updated guidance released on July 22nd. What we know now is that there will be full-time in-person instruction. There will be a focus on building relationships for exactly what Director Gordon had talked about. We will have pre-pandemic instructional time requirements. The decision will be local and advisory rather than mandatory for masks, social distancing, and cohorting. I am anticipating that ODE is going to stay the course, or the Oregon Department of Education is going to stay the course and support our local decision-making and our local data and our local guidelines. And I will be very disappointed if something different comes out on July 22nd.
Questions or comments about?
When it comes to, yes, the mask mandate, the local decision-making, do you foresee putting out perhaps a survey, reaching out to the community, kind of their thoughts and their comfort level with mask, no mask, optional, just all those things and kind of getting their feel for what they're thinking about the mask situation fall.
I appreciate you asking that, and I reached out to regional superintendents last week to get a sense of where they were leaning. And I will be meeting with regional superintendents next week to go over that very thing, because what we want is to ensure that all needs are met, whether we have families, parents, children who want to wear masks or not want to wear masks. We want to be able to respect that decision. That's the bottom line. So that's the discussion I'm going to be having with the regional superintendents, is how do we get that word out? How do we make sure that our community understands that, appreciates that? I think a survey is an excellent idea.
Well, if I could, I didn't mean to jump in. I read an article, who's those guys that send out daily,
Woody,
OSBA.
oh, the OSBA.
OSBA had an article about they're gonna run the same plan that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But they said, I understood them to say, on buses, they're gonna make people wear masks. And so I think that ends up being part of that whole discussion. We don't want people standing out there at the bus stop thinking that they can get on without a mask and
Yes.
have that insanity go on. So anyhow, I think that's an important part of that question.
It'd be important for me to follow up on that and get clarity around that. I would hope that local control would also mean that we can
Exactly.
make decisions
Yes.
about buses and kids riding buses.
If summer school started today, what are we doing today or this week?
Today, we are having our students wearing masks for indoor instruction only. I consulted again with regional superintendents. I reached out to about 10 area superintendents to ask what their approach was going to be for summer school. And 4 responded back, and they all responded that they were requiring masks, again, for indoor instruction.
And I also want to just add, as we move ahead as a board, we influence and we provide our opinions about operational decisions. And operational decisions really, and masks, yes or no, is an operational decision. That really is with the superintendent and the administrative team. And again, not that the board does not influence those decisions, but this is one of those that I just want to state out loud that is an operational decision that lies with the superintendent and her team. And we as a board hire and fire the superintendent and influence with our opinions matter, right? So just want to make that statement, because I think it's just important to remember that it's this odd, what do we do as a board? We provide our opinions, we provide direction, we adopt a budget, we adopt policy, and the operational decisions of day-to-day, what things look like in the classroom, that really lies with the superintendent and her administrative team. So just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
It gets gray, of course, but on paper, that's the kind of chain of command. So
So
I appreciate that.
is this kind of like where we would provide our opinion, kind of thoughts initially on the mask guidelines for fall, or is that?
I think once the updated RSSL framework comes out on July 22nd, we're going to end up with recommendations likely, or we're going to be presented with the plan. I'm remembering how things went in the last year, and how it went was once things were updated by ODE and the state, the superintendent presented the plan that had been developed through hours and hours of work, and let the board know what the plan was. And we were allowed to discuss it and provide our input and opinions. And so I anticipate that that's how it's going to happen this time as well. Hopefully by August, we will be in a position to have a plan proposed for how school's going to look in September. Hopefully, and we know that hope only goes so far, considering how things have gone in the last year, 15 months. So, but yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's kind of the progression. And those updated RSSL, that really will be very informative for us on how we're gonna proceed.
With regards to summer school, the current one does indeed state that it could be used for summer school.
Yes.
On July 23rd, is it possible for us, or actually for Mrs. Stuckey, to change the course for summer school at the very least, should they continue with a recommendation and not a requirement?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. That is a great question, and the answer is yes.
I thought that through. And I think, yeah, absolutely.
And I'll be transparent about that too. With Superintendent Stoops, he and I talked about, he let me know where they were going in June with their decision on summer school, based on, again, what neighboring districts are doing. And it's a lot, it would be challenging to start without masks. And then if we're surprised by the RSSL guidelines, July 23rd, to then requirement, it would be hard to go back to masks once you're maskless. That was one of
Oh,
the,
gosh.
that was one of the factors that influence the decision. And it's not great. We're not making everybody happy for sure. And yeah, so yes, we will know more July 22nd, July 23rd,
Yes.
what that's gonna look like. Good questions.
The last piece that I wanted to update on is just how my first week has gone. It's been a busy one, and it started with several days of looking at operational systems, fiscal, technology platforms, calendar alignment, new passwords, learning different programs, but also included outreach to the board of directors, as well as regional superintendents, the district administrators, and I've spent a fair amount of time also working with community concerns or community questions that have come up. So that is what I've been doing. And then also beginning to focus more on school board development and looking forward to the planning for the July 27th training and new director onboarding.
And you're still here after almost a full week.
I'm still
That's
here.
good. That's good, thank you. Any other questions or comments for Rachel on her report? Thank you. Thank you. So moving on to board member reports, and actually this is talked to, I think, in our board protocols, but during board member reports, the intention is that we report back to the board on specific maybe activities within the district that we participated in, or something for the good of the order that we want the rest of the board to know about. We don't intend it to be bringing up controversial issues as a surprise. So we are hoping that this board member report doesn't create a lot of drama for the meetings. I mean, it can, but that's the intention. And that was actually
But as it states in our
operating protocol.
right,
Yeah.
but that is not the intent.
Right.
And if you have something that you intend or need to bring up that may create a new agenda item, you should do the same thing as everybody else in the public does, and that is provided by, is it Wednesday, Jill, or is it Monday before?
For board member report.
Pardon?
Yeah, to adjust the.
If we want to adjust the agenda?
Agenda. Yeah, probably by Wednesday, right?
Yeah, Wednesday is good. Wednesday before the board meeting. And remember that you can always make a motion to adjust the agenda. as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that piece about, that isn't the time to do that, and
Yeah.
that we, as members of the community, also operate on the same ground parallel that citizens operate at.
Yeah. And just a word about that. When we adopt the agenda, we're messaging out what we're going to be talking about. And so another reason why we don't want the board member reports to turn into a new action item or discussion item is that that's not being very transparent for the public. If we're moving in a direction that's not been stated on the agenda, if someone learns of that and they wanted to be part of that discussion, it lands not well. So we're trying to have our transparency be a key lens of how we operate, I guess, is a good way to say it. So, yeah, and I'm pausing just to bring us all kind of onto the same page with 2 new people, and actually 3 new people at the table. So anyway, hopefully it's helpful and somewhat, getting people's mindset in a place that you have kind of a sense of what it all means.
Well,
Right, so-
you'd asked for input from members, and I imagine, Jill, you've caught it, but on our stationery, that we have the old board members and Troy, and I was just hoping we could, because these guys are all effective already.
It's in the works. I was actually waiting for a new chair and vice
Yes.
tonight,
Okay.
which doesn't really matter.
Yes.
It's on the way.
Yes. Thank you. So any board member reports? Do you guys have anything to share on your learning with your OSBA
Through
summer?
Zoom.
All through Zoom. Yeah, I know. You didn't get a good bend.
No, just the thing that I want to add to the August agenda about empowering youth voices and really listening to our students is
Yeah.
something that I think would be really beneficial.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk more about that on August.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
I like that idea.
That's a great idea. Okay, so as we are moving on, we have item 6.3, annual physical restraint and seclusion report. And Erica is going to.
It's always super exciting. It's even more exciting this year because it's all zeros. It's really just a formality. It
It's
needs
hard to be physically restraining.
When you're at
students
home.
when they're not in person.
through Zoom. Hopefully parents turned off the camera when they hauled their children out. I mean, honestly, we usually are very low, which is pretty exciting. But I do need to obviously have that caveat of we were not in person very long. So the numbers are a little bit skewed. But if just to make note, a couple of years ago, which is at the top there, the report, the way they calculate and collect data is a little bit different. So this report does look slightly different these last couple of years. Also of note that we do not have a quote self-contained classroom in our district. So most of our students who may require that level of support are not receiving services within our district. So that also does skew our data. Not that we have not had restraints or seclusions before, but it's just for the board to know, for our new superintendent, for our new board members, and for our community members to know. I would love to take credit for all the great things that are going on. I do think we have some really great things, but those numbers are probably artificially low with those things to consider. Yes, Andrea.
It makes me remember before COVID, you're talking about implementing a behavioral classroom
I
at
know we
elementary
talked
level.
about that. We were this close and then.
Is that something that's going to be added come this September? Is that behavioral classroom?
I don't
for
think we
students?
could, I can't commit to that right now. I mean, we're truly just like getting our wings back, from that. We're just trying to talk about how to reopen. It's still on my radar, but I can't commit to that right now. It's on the horizon.
We still have the behavior specialists at the elementary level
Mhm.
for next year.
Yeah, that was added from SIU dollars. We've added, since I've been here, I think about when I started, we had 0.15 FTE of school psychologists, and we shared 2 school counselors FTE throughout the entire district. And I think about all the FTE that we have now to support social emotional learning. It's quite remarkable. It's not enough when you think about how the demographics of students have changed, but what we haven't recovered from the last year and a half, I can't commit to the resources for that at this time. Ask me in a few months.
Yeah, it'd be a great asset for
Yes.
our, especially our elementary level,
Yeah.
to have, for
Yeah.
sure.
Ask me in a few months.
Any other questions on the seclusion report? Thank you. Now we're moving on to public forum, and we do have Tony Roof signed up. Jill, is there anybody signed up from our remote land? Okay. And if anybody wants to sign up, I have the sign up sheet. So Tony, if you want to come forward, and you have 3 minutes, and give me the, so I do need to make my statement, you know, as I always do. Individual comments are limited to 3 minutes. If more time is required, please submit comments or questions in writing. At this time, members of the public are invited to present concerns to the board. Speakers may offer objective criticism of school operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual school personnel.
Am I on?
A
Oh, hello.
reminder that at this time,
So Tony Astorga also signed up for public forum.
okay, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Tony Astorga, we're gonna have Tony Roof first, so let me get through my spiel. And during this time, we hear from the public and we don't engage really directly with those that are presenting. And then the board can have a discussion after and you know, maybe say, oh, that's something that we should add to the agenda for next month or whatever. So it's a little awkward because it is not an opportunity to like go back and forth with one another, but we always want to hear, and we always want to hear from the public when you have something to share. So I'm going to start my 3-minute timer. Tony Roof, not Tony Astorga. Let me get ready here. Sorry for the confusion.
Just anxious to speak.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't really have a speech prepared or a comment. I just wanted to say that my daughter Samantha is really looking forward to the camps that are going on, and that's really great that you're offering something for all of the kids, because they don't qualify for it. I mean, they're just the grown kids. So she's super excited about that. And the other thing is that I have my little boy is going to be entering kindergarten this fall, and that I'm hoping that school will be normal for him to start out his school experience, and that requiring masks for our family would be a deal breaker. And we would seek alternative forms of education, because I just cannot send my little boy to kindergarten wearing a mask. So I would encourage that at the very least that they be optional. So I just wanted to say that. And I appreciate you all for all the hard work you're doing, and welcome to our district. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. All right. And yeah, you only used a minute of your 3.
Well, there we go. Tony Astorga can have the rest.
That's too hard for me to keep track. You only get 3 minutes. All right, and let's go to Tony Astorga next, and then we'll go to Shanna after that. So Tony, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm starting my timer. Go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate, and I agree with what Tony Roof said, was that I have a couple students, and I have a kindergartner coming in as well, my daughter Olivia. And she, with a lot of these younger kids, they have aversions to wearing these masks, and they get nervous and they get finicky. And I really feel for the kindergarten teachers that have to deal with, you know, some of the emotional scars that these kids are, you know, getting with wearing these masks. But another issue that I have is I thought the board is acting in our stead for the public to not only steer policy, but to direct the staff on what the community would like to see done. I don't have to get a direct answer now. You guys can email it to me. I would appreciate that. But I would like to know if there's going to be a survey sent out to parents, that if we could somehow get our opinion about how we feel comfortable with wearing masks for our kids in school or not. And if it is, like Tony said, we probably will seek other means to send our child to a different school. And I'm probably sure a lot of other parents will too, and that's funding lost for the district. And that's not something I want to see. As a person who's grown up in Mount Angel and seen the excellent education that the district has provided, not only for me, but for countless others, I don't want to see that lost. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate all your answers, and I know it's a lot to take in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony Astorga. And you too didn't use your full 3 minutes. And finally, Shanna Shecker.
Hi, everybody. I also like to say welcome and welcome. We're happy to have you guys here, especially volunteer time. Oh my goodness, just being on board is a huge commitment. So thank all of you for everything that you do. I have 2 things. Number 1, echoing Tony and Tony. I personally know 5 families that have deposits in private schools waiting to find out what the mask guidance is going to be for this district. I'm included in that I won't be bringing my kids here if we have to wear masks. So there's that. The next thing, I'd like to read something, and this is from the Mount Angel Board Policies and Procedures that I pulled off of the website Board Policies real quick. And it says, questions asked by the public when possible will be answered by the board chair or referred to the superintendent for reply. Questions requiring investigation at the discretion of the board chair be referred to the superintendent for response at a later time. So my question to you is, why do you tell the people on comments they can't ask questions? And why do you tell us that it's not a time for discussion when the policy says that this is a time to ask questions?
Yeah, so when questions come in and we're not prepared to answer them, it's hard to do it within the meeting. And that's a good reminder, Shanna. I'll review that policy and I'll make sure that, yeah. And you can share your comments and questions. We just can't guarantee that we'll be able to ask them within the meeting. Yeah.
Great, thank you for reviewing that. Because you had led earlier, they're telling the people online that this isn't an avenue to ask questions.
The chat wasn't, I was talking about the chat function in Zoom. It's not an avenue to ask questions of the host.
Okay.
During public forum, if you ask questions, we will record them and follow it later.
Wonderful.
That was a difference of setting.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that, but I also want to reiterate that the chat for those in Zoom is not appropriate to ask questions of the board or the host. During public forum, that's your chance to share your concerns, to ask questions. Yes.
And I was having the impression that we weren't supposed to ask
You
questions.
can. I'm just not in a position to answer them factually during the meeting.
And we understand that they're not always going to know the answers, but we can ask questions.
Absolutely.
And if you can answer them, you'll answer them.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. Good clarification.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Just like that. Asking a question and I was able to answer it.
Thank you.
All right. So does anybody have comments or?
I do have one, and Erica might know. At the end of June, was there a survey sent to the kids in CDL if they had a choice to stay in CDL or not? Was there anything like that done?
This is my understanding because the principals sent it out. So actually the parents would probably be better to answer this. My understanding is that a short survey went out to families in general about
Families in CDL?
just families about choices for next year, about what y'all would potentially choose. I think it was like a 4. See?
Yes.
Tony Roof with the answer.
Yes.
Yeah, I think there was one.
There was one.
Yeah, and so I think from that, I believe Troy presented on that in June, because I believe John asked the question about people who would choose CDL for next year, like are those particularly students in the CDL now? And I think it was like, well, we would assume, but there's a flaw in your data, right? Of like, well, we didn't target them specifically. It went to all families. So I think that would be, good feedback about, well, what should be asked, as far as survey design, like that's really good feedback, right? If there's specific questions about math, you know what I'm saying? Like, we design something and then it's like, well, hindsight's always 20/20, right? Like, oh, should have asked it this way.
Yeah, I think the survey is important. In the past, I don't feel like the district does enough to really get a good hold of certain demographics. So it would be nice to, you know, if we're only getting 10% response, you know, besides just sending out a survey and getting an email or whatever, finding other ways of engaging the community. Because some of the community might right now just be like, I'm turning my phone off.
Right.
Like I'm enjoying summer, but to
Yeah,
kind of
that's
see,
probably not the best time to send it out. Yeah.
but you know, to kind of see what kind of demographics we're getting back responses for, and if we're missing a big part of our demographic that's not responding, to try to find other ways to reach out to them, and to say we're, you know, getting that input from our community is huge.
Do you want a response to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually do get really great survey responses. And then when we do break it up by demographic, for example, that we want, whether it's by school or by race, ethnicity, when we ask that, because if that's really what we want to look at, then we are able, we had a hard time at the beginning when we were doing it because we were trying to collect like emails, because then we know exactly who is. And that kind of, then we started getting not only automatic duplicitous responses, sometimes we were getting like 6, like it was kind of, but then we can follow up with people specifically, like, you know, hey, Andrea, haven't heard from you, would you mind, you know, filling this survey out? That's the great thing about when it automatically collects, you know, the email. We also have a lot of families who don't have email. And so we run into, you know, nothing's perfect. We also, it kind of, you know, as a parent, you're probably like, oh my gosh, another survey, like we worked, right? And so that's the other thing, like we were sending them out so often because honestly, we really do need your feedback. But then it was like,
Another survey?
yeah, right? Like, are you kidding me, Mount Angel? Another survey? And we're like, yeah, another survey, because we need to know what, like, you know, this really is a community that wants, and, you know, I've been here long enough now to know, like, what I think is not going to be what you think, right? And I don't want to make the decision on your behalf. And so sending out surveys is tricky.
And I would just add to that too, Andrea, the ability for us to engage with and hear from the majority, at least, of our community stakeholders, our families, it's always something we're looking at, and always looking at how to do it better. And with a new superintendent on board, I'm guessing that one of our areas of focus as a board will be how to improve our community engagement, how to make ourselves more accessible, and hear from more than just the majority white families. Yeah. I mean, just put it bluntly. Yeah. And that is definitely an area of focus for us, and it always has been, and we are just really challenged. So I'm excited about a new superintendent, new board members, people paying so much more attention than ever before is huge. I mean, this is wonderful to see the level of participation in our meetings and whatnot. So it's kind of a long answer, or a long kind of observation. And yes, it's a challenge. And yes, we're going to continue to work to always do things better, because we're never going to be good enough, I don't think.
Yes. Jill, do we have a lot of people on Zoom?
We have, I was gonna say too, Sherry, we just have one more public forum coming in.
Oh,
Request from Amber.
okay, yeah, we haven't moved on in the agenda. So
Haven't moved on, yeah.
Yeah.
But we have like 18
That's good.
Yeah,
That's nice.
Great.
yeah, pre-pandemic, if we had
Just my
3
3 minutes. I have one more last little thing. I am extremely nervous to public speak, so if there's any shortness coming off of me, it is nothing towards anybody in this room. I just get very nervous to public speak, and then I'm all done.
But yeah,
When I sat down, my heart was racing. I hope I didn't come off like, I'm very nervous about it.
So yeah, let's move on to Amber.
Amber.
Yeah.
How the last name?
Okay, so Amber, you're gonna have 3 minutes, and whenever you want to start speaking, I'll start the timer.
Okay. Hi, I'm Amber Banducci. I have 3 kids within the Mount Angel School District, and we actually transferred our kids into that school district because it was a small school district and it had a sense of community. And over the last 18 months, it has really come to light that I think some of the board members are trying to make decisions based on the big business and other surrounding school districts that do not fit the community of Mount Angel. And one of the things with the masks, all of our kids have been together for 8 playing around. The survival rate, let alone with this pandemic, is astronomical among kids, and to require them to wear masks when the majority of time, I think is just a disservice to the kids and to the community. And to have the
We lost you, Amber.
Oh, it took me off. Okay. To have the CDC come out and say that they might do a recommendation with vaccinated or unvaccinated, I think whether the board, whatever their approach is, it would just cause essentially segregation within the school. And I think it's completely unacceptable. If family members do not feel comfortable sending their kids to school without a mask, then send them to school with a mask, but it should be up to the individual families. And I think that really needs to be a consideration of what the board looks like as a whole, instead of what surrounding areas are doing.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Right, anybody else, Jill? Okay, so moving on. So this is a part of our agenda. We're moving into executive session, and I don't have my script for executive session, but it is per ORA something, and it's for contract negotiations with our union. So at this time, we need to have those in the audience leave because this is of a confidential nature. And if any members of the news media are present and want to remain in the room, you can. We just ask that you keep what is discussed in executive session in executive session. And when we're out of executive session, we'll let you know and you can come back. So continuing on with our agenda, we are at action items, which we have done, and discussion items, professional development calendar. So this is where Rachel and Erica.
Mr. Gordon is going to take that to save my voice.
Yeah, so, of course, as soon as I sit down, I get like, hi. So you have a copy of the updated professional development calendar packet for those of you who are looking at it online. Really, the only things that are changed are that some more dates were solidified. So before we may have had like early September, et cetera. So dates were solidified. Our contract is confirmed with Character Strong, so those dates are in there. Yeah, so I believe every date is now, except for things that were like the schools need to, there's a couple early September in there. So all the dates were solidified, and then QPR was added. There was also, the last time that we met, the school calendar, there was an early release that was missing. And so that has now been added into the PE calendar as well. So those are the changes, really just more refinement and additions that were already at the end of the calendar. So there shouldn't be any like big surprises.
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, as I look at it, from November 3rd through the end of the year, we're on equity.
Yep.
And on equity, as I read it, as I read, I see critical race theory is a substantial component of equity. Is this true or not?
How do you?
I'm saying as I read equity, and as it has been expressed to me by a teacher in a Salem school district, that he has not sat in on an equity session of which critical race theory was not a backbone piece.
Okay, well, I can talk to you about like where we're coming from. I think equity is much larger than race,
Good,
first of all, first and foremost.
it should be.
I can add though, and there's a huge discrepancy in our data in two different areas.
And there's what?
There's a huge discrepancy in our data in two different areas.
Okay,
And I believe you've already spoken to this, that our Hispanic students do not do as well in this district as our white students.
that is correct.
So there's that. Also, our students with disabilities do not do as well.
Correct, and that's very,
So-
both of those are very standard throughout the United States.
So those would be, two pieces to look at. Just, I'm going into my 8th year here. No matter what we've done, the outcomes for those two groups of students have not changed. So two of the pieces really to look at are the individual and the systems. And so we need to make sure that we're operating with a common language as a district.
Good,
And so that's, so far, what we've done is we really talked about that we're all using common language, because if we are not in agreement on, does this mean the same thing to you as it does to me? For example, critical race theory might mean something to you and it might mean something totally different to me. We need to make sure that we're operating on the same definitions. So we're really going like way back to basics and talking about language at this point. That's where we're at. And then we're surveying staff at the end of every session is what we've done. And based on that feedback, the school psychologist and myself have been designing the next session. So we don't have anything prescriptive. It's all been based on feedback from one session to the next.
So where do you start?
Where do we start? I'd have to go back. We started really on, I have to go back. We started really looking at, we didn't even start talking about equity.
This is a continuation of something you've been working on.
No, this is starting the work. It's really starting the work because, we've tried a variety of things and we can put numbers in front of people all day long and it hasn't changed, right? We've taught strategies and it hasn't changed the outcome. And targeting our white students is not going to raise our data, right? We have to target. We have to continue to do that, but elevating everybody raises the district overall. And so we really need to look at how do we both as an individual through self-reflection and what are there potentially systematically that we are doing that are changing the outcome because if someone's skin perhaps is a different color, is it leading to a different outcome? It's a question. Our data does say that that is a thing in our district, whether we want to admit it or not, it's a thing.
Are you, sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
I saw kind of information about a book within the district about on equity for staff to pick up. I can link to
Sure.
that discussion. What is that book? Is that
So
all staff, is all staff that are reading this book?
No.
And this is the PD on it?
Nope.
Okay.
So I'd be happy to talk about that. So on session 2, there was an optional for 3 different books, and staff had the choice if they wanted to do summer reading, the district would pay. There were 3 different. One was called Blind Spot. One was Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, and one was on anti-race, how to be an anti-racist. And again, it was totally optional if they wanted to do it. The other option that staff had was if they wanted to connect with others over the summer and so they could read it on their own if they wanted to, and if they wanted to create, read it together, then that was another thing in the form. And then I just sent an email being like, hey, you indicated this, you guys can get together on your own.
Is there any follow-up when they return from summer about any of the information that they read?
No, that's on their own, for their own personal.
In talking about the books, I see that we spent Blind Spot $220, How to Be an Anti-Racist $55, and Uncomfortable $77. How is it that that looks like probably 4 times as many books for Blind Spot as there were? So is Blind Spot an accompaniment to How to Be an Anti-Racist?
No, they're all different books.
Okay, and so
if I had my computer, I could look up and tell you how many people ordered each book. Blind Spot was a paperback. The other 2 were actually cheaper to get the hardback than the paperback. I think 4 each were ordered of the other 2. Far more people were interested in Blind Spot.
sure it's a paperback. Well, that's all.
I think I
That's
don't
all I
think that
didn't
was it. I think it was actually more of that is more of an introductory look at perhaps hidden biases versus rigor.
I made a bad joke.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I actually thought it was a good one, but
Okay. Dad, we'll call it a dad joke.
Erica, we did develop an equity lens.
Yes.
This was,
About 2.5 years ago, I think.
a while ago.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time that we wanted to come back to this to make sure that it's a useful working document. And I'm wondering how it is. And with this work that you're, moving ahead for professional development, just curious how our equity lens stands since we've had it again.
I'm not really sure how to respond to that. I have looked at it. I would like for it to be brought back to the board for review because Oregon has an equity lens as well. And as part of the work with House Bill 3499, it is required that we do an audit using the Oregon Equity Lens tool. So perhaps I can speak more about that at another time.
Yeah, and I guess, my train of thought is that it's probably time to take a look at this, make sure that it makes sense, make sure that it's not redundant. I mean, if House Bill 3499 is prescriptive of what our equity lens needs to be, is this redundant or necessary or too long or not good enough?
I remember at the time it was really great. But we've been doing a lot of, I believe, really good work around just comprehensive needs assessment with district. And House Bill 3499.
My other question on professional development was, I believe it was last year, we made a contract with Trillium.
Yes.
And Trillium was supposed to, I know they did when people were having the real critical things that went wrong, suicide, etc., they get in on that. But I thought they were supposed to do a thing about teaching teachers and staff how to be better listeners. Is that right?
You're so close, super close. So that is, if you look on like.
We're doing horseshoes, we're doing horseshoes.
Yes, totally getting points, man. So 916 and 10.5, or excuse me. So they're coming in, they're doing trauma-informed care, 916, 10.6, and 10.13. So we started our contract with them last year, and we have both FTE with them,
Great.
as well as professional development. And they're doing adverse childhood experiences,
Great.
ACEs. So, and they're looking at, so trauma-informed care, teaching staff, and it's all staff, how to work with students who have experienced trauma, and also working with staff on how to regulate themselves. So like experiencing that secondary trauma,
Right.
because like if we're not regulated, it's hard to work with
Bingo.
students who are dysregulated. So that's one part with the professional development. We did 4 modules actually, and so now they're like tailoring it for us on how do we onboard staff as well as keep the momentum going. And then we have our FTE. So we have a full-time mental health specialist. It's co-funded where we have 0.5 of prevention, where they can work with students just under prevention, which we pay for. We pay for that. The other half of that is actually called outpatient, so it's direct clinical therapy. And that is actually paid through Medicaid billing.
I think the basis of my question is, are we getting as much out of Trillium as we can? I didn't know about that. Their person of, that they have sitting in the school. But I see 4 sessions, essentially, I'm saying a session is 45 minutes. They got 2 45s and an hour and a half, so 4 sessions of suicide prevention. But because I thought that Trillium was doing more than that, I wondered, did we hire somebody and say, this is the way we need to do things? And everybody was so moved by what happened last year. I was hoping we weren't just flushing that and say, now we have to do something else.
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. They only offer their 4 preset modules, and they're like, they have them and they're done. And so for our staff to repeat them again wouldn't necessarily be beneficial.
Nope.
So I'm working with them to kind of take those and condense them. And then we're also going to be working on some case studies to really give staff, like, what would you do in this scenario, and give them practical application. And then the other trainings that actually we did throughout the rest of the year, the crisis cycle and so forth, I actually did those trainings.
Okay.
It wasn't training, it was me.
And I think that's about as far as we can go overnight. We're at close 30.
I'll go all night, man.
I'm gonna pass out. I feel cool here.
It is really hot. It is really hot.
Any other questions or comments?
It's a fluid document, and if there's changes, we'll bring it back.
Yeah,
I just,
exactly. Good.
sorry, a lot of that, the SEL, especially
Yes.
coming back full-time
Right,
in the fall.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot that we don't know
absolutely.
what's gonna, kids who seem fine, you may not know, right? And so I see a couple of times, like one time on the 2nd where it's, the SEL curriculum is at school level, but then later on it's at the district level. right? And so I was just wondering, like, how much time is being spent by each principal, because that SEL curriculum, essentially, you deal with high school students differently in
Yeah.
different language than you deal with the SEL curriculum of elementary students. So how much SEL curriculum and PD is going to be spent early on, especially early on, getting those
Right.
systems put in place?
So that's a super question. This is where we're having Character Strong. I'd like to say come out, but it'll be virtual and doing the training. So we're expanding Character Strong to the elementary school this year. It's been really successful at secondary. We're expanding secondary to include leadership. So leadership at secondary will actually have a curriculum and not what they've currently been doing. So that's a great expansion, as well as expanding to K-5. If you have elementary school students, they already have a pretty strong tier 1 base with PACS Good Behavior Game, as well as zones of regulation. Character Strong is different in that it's explicit direct teaching, and to have a common K-12 curriculum is going to be really great. But investing in that initial PD is going to be really important. But then what happens is with that direct teaching is it's all created, but there still needs to be somebody who's facilitating that throughout the year and organizing it and getting it to teachers and kind of vetting it like, oh, this is one lesson, but we're going to stretch it out over 2. And so that will still be carried out at the school level. Usually it's the counselor, or it might be, they all have their self or culture assignment teams. So that those decisions will be made at the building level. I can't say right now, you know, how much they'll dedicate to that throughout. The way the current calendar is, the elementary school does get that extra January day because of how our calendars work out. So we will be having Character Strong come out to do an additional training with elementary staff in January. So that's an additional training for them for their initial year 1 implementation.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.